My name is Janice B. Gordon, and this is Scale Your Sales Podcast. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, listed number 9 of 43 best podcasts for every sales professional. I am Janice B. Gordon, the customer growth expert, and recommended by LinkedIn Sales as one of 15 innovating sales influencers to follow. In this episode of Scale Your Sales Podcast, I talk to a serial founder and entrepreneur. He actually used his experience of getting investment to create his platform, Connected. You're going to hear all about his story and what are the real benefits of being part of his ecosystem and community, but also we talk about neurodiversity and also what the workforce should look like in the future and how we can attract Gen Z into the workforce and create more flexibility, but also power up productivity as well. My next guest is a serial entrepreneur, investor, founder, and CEO of Connected. Welcome to Scale Your Sales Podcast, Roei Samuel.
Janice, thanks so much for having me.
It's great, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It really got a fantastic response, and when I listened to it twice, because it was that good. You're amazing. Such a great host, so I hope I can live up to your standards, Roei.
Thank you so much for saying. Yeah, absolutely. We got so much positive feedback. It was so great hearing your view on things, and just amazing to see how many people resonate with your progressive view on the way to structure sales and the mentality that goes into it. And I think a lot of people were relieved to hear it as well, because, there is so much of that old school mentality that people are fed up of. And great to see sales leaders such as yourself really shining the light for the new way.
Well, I'm glad, this is the Big Energy podcast. So guys, please go and listen to this episode. And literally, I'm hooked on all of them. I've listened to so many. It's really great. And, I've been campaigning for a long time for us to get rid of the kind of macho culture. We're just people, just like any other industry, and why it should be treated differently and in such a disrespectful way that we talked about on the podcast. So, let's continue the discussion here. So, Roei, you're a serial entrepreneur, founder. You even set up an organization to help other founders as well. So give us a bit of background about your founding journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for that. So I've been messing around with startups since I was 14, not calling them startups, just trying to launch various projects, running music nights for friends, getting involved with various different things, basically anything to take my mind off focusing on school. And, just always sort of had a bit of entrepreneurial spirit. And then started my first tech company in 2012, which was essentially a content creation toolkit. So helping people create podcasts, videos, other types of content, giving them tools to share that content through social media platforms and a community to share everything with as well, which is really, really standard now. But actually back in 2012, 2013, it was quite bleeding edge technology. We got really, really fortunate with that business because we applied it to the worlds of sports and gaming. And it was just when sports journalism was having a big renaissance on Twitter, and just after a really big gaming platform called Twitch had launched, which was eventually acquired by Amazon, still massive, massive gaming platform. So lots of people were using our tools to create content for those platforms. So we got very, very fortunate with that, scaled it to just shy of 9 million monthly active users, and then sold that company to a gaming company called Gfinity in 2018. Off the back of that, I started investing in startups and advising startups as well. And what I found, my experience as a first-time founder was, if you're not in network, it can be a totally confusing way to try and build a business. Understanding investor relations is not something which comes natural to most people because it's not a natural skill if you've not spent 10 years in financial services and everything else. So you're muddling around a little bit. And I was very, very fortunate the first time around to have really, really understanding, very, very supportive angel investors who are really helped me get through that journey. And then I saw the massive benefits of that, because when it came to selling the company or raising funding, we had a really aligned group of shareholders. When I started investing in other founders, I realized this is, quite a common problem for people who haven't come from VC, the finance world, etc. So we became really, really passionate about building tools that would help businesses and help founders understand and really manage in a very, very frictionless way the way that they're building their relationships with their investors, with their advisors. Because you might be a brilliant marketeer, you might be brilliant in sales, technology, but this whole piece, the dark arts of speaking with investors, finding investors, not natural to many people. So we became very passionate about trying to really level the playing field there by giving everyone in the ecosystem the tools to understand how to manage and discover these investors.
Right. So you say that it saves an average of 6.5 hours in reporting. So what does that mean?
Yeah, so when you're looking at investor reporting, there's two sides to it. There's the quantitative side, which is how much did we grow this month, how much did we spend, what are our unit economics, what's our cost of acquisition, etc. And then you have the qualitative element to that. So what's the narrative? Why did these things happen? And then there's the administrative element of who did I send it to, who's seen what, is everyone in the loop? So the way that the connected platform works is businesses are able to integrate their open banking system, their accounting software, and their payment solution. So their HSBC bank account, their QuickBooks accounting software, and their Stripe or PayPal payment solution. We ingest all of that data and we auto-calculate and populate their reporting environment. So all the metrics a business doesn't even know it should be reporting on, let alone how to calculate them, we do that on their behalf so that they're able to just save time on figuring out where they are as a business, etc. They're then able to store all this information in a dashboard, which they can invite all their investors to have access to. And they can share different levels of information with different types of investors. They might share everything with their lead VC and their board of directors. They might share slightly less information with minority shareholders, depending on what they've agreed with them. But now they never need to worry again about who's seen what, who's got access. It's all there in one place. So all of the administrative and calculating the quantitative element of their progress is all done for them. And it's often when it comes to managing your relationship with your investors, it's a really anxiety-filled activity for founders, because it's your most important relationships, the lifeblood of your business. You don't want to get it wrong. So we're trying to just make that as frictionless as possible.
Sounds fantastic, so much easier, because you really want to just focus on running the business and building the team. And if you constantly pull back into, and often you've got very creative people, they're not necessarily analytical people, and this is completely foreign to them. So in your experience, how has the platform evolved over a period of time from what it was to what are the add-ons to it? Because I know that you've got a mentoring side to it as well, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were originally looking at how we help businesses manage their relationships with their investors, but then we were getting so many requests from our community saying, great, I've got that, I now need help with this, right? And of course, we should always be listening to our community to see how we can service them better. So we realized that there was a bit of a gap in the market when it comes to advisors, non-exec directors, experts, fractional CFOs, the types of individuals that early stage founders really need access to help them grow, to help them scale as a business, to give them lots of knowledge where they can't afford to hire them full time, as we know from many bootstrap businesses. And what happened during the COVID pandemic, and I think is going to be a continuing trend, is individuals are looking at how to monetize their time in different ways. Maybe they've been made redundant from work, or they're trying to look at ways of supplementing their income with monetizing their time and their expertise in a different way. So we realized we could add on the business to investor element. We could add on a really exciting vertical of business to advisor. So now we have a lot of knowledge transfer. We have the ability for people to upskill, and in the same way that we're trying to democratize that access for founders, we're also trying to democratize access for individuals to get into the startup world. Lots of people who come from corporate careers, they love the ideas of startup. They want to be more involved in something exciting and fast paced. But again, how do you get involved? So this way we're bringing people together on that side too.
So what is the next iteration? What are you working on next?
So for us, the really next key to the to the puzzle, is that an analogy? Piece of the puzzle, maybe. Next piece of the puzzle is really international expansion. So we have customers in about 15 countries at the moment, but our system is only really designed for the UK. So people are using it in a bit of a makeshift way. So we're currently just iterating, optimizing, and doing a lot of localization to the product to allow us to expand into a few more markets. So hopefully we'll be in 5 markets this time next year.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, another area that you're renowned for, if that's the right word, is talking about neurodiversity. And I don't know, you probably know, only kind of 1 in 10 organizations that they actually consider neurodiversity in the workplace in terms of the practices and the policies. So tell me more about why this is an important campaign for you and how you think it really benefits organizations.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really fantastic point and something I'm super passionate about. So for context, I was diagnosed with dyslexia, severe dyslexia, 7 years old, 8 years old, where I was basically struggling to read, and something was wrong, as it were, and then diagnosed with severe ADHD at the age of 15. And it's really interesting because I think my journey in the education system really formed a lot of the way that I see we should be applying accessibility and inclusivity within the workplace, because I was about to be kicked out of school at 15 years old. I was on the verge of being kicked out of school, had to beg to be allowed to do my GCSEs. And the reason why is because how it looked to my teachers when you're looking at things from a neurotypical perspective is I'm absent, I don't care, I'm not bothered, my head's not in the game, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then when it came to exam time, I was able to do well in my exams. And it was like, oh, okay, clearly there is a big difference between how it seems and actually what's going on up here. And that was a really eye-opening thing for me, and managed to do well academically and get myself to university because the school started allowing me to work in a way that suited me better. And it started to be much more flexible. So I credit my school massively, actually, with not kicking me out and saying, okay, well, we'll allow you to try and do this your way, which was great. And I think that's something which I've always then applied into the workplace, whether that be, I've done a bad job if people don't feel like they can come to work wearing whatever they want, right? If they can't listen to their headphones, or they want to work in a quiet area in the breakout space, or they want to work flexibly, or, they want to have a day where they have no meetings, and all of these things really allow us to accommodate for lots of different types of diversity. And the reason why Connected, I believe, has a 96% staff retention rate over 4 years is because even if you're neurotypical, having different ways of working is actually massively beneficial as well. Giving people accommodating for as many things as possible is just a broadly positive thing, regardless of neurodiversity, being neurotypical. All these accommodations are going to help people thrive.
I think it's interesting. We're all diverse. We all there is. It's really strange when we look at neurotypical. Well, actually, when you break that down, it just means that there's a group of people that are not typical.
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
but it's just our DNA says that we're all unique and different. We have different levels of abilities, and schools flatten all of that out rather than appreciating the differences. And I've looked into some really interesting schools, Bali, in various corners of the world that allow students to create their own course and their own plan. So they make a decision about what they're interested in based on their strengths, and then they develop a program around that. And so much of school focuses on weaknesses, and because it irons out, it tries to flatten diversity. Because we have one system, you've got to go through the system, and if you don't fit, we're going to chuck you out. But actually, if we look at human nature is so divergent that it just seems this is not really fit for purpose. And then in the workplace is exactly the same. There's a real challenge with companies wanting to force people back into the workplace and
Mm.
wanting them to fit, into a square box that doesn't really exist anymore, really. So there are lots of challenges within in employers, not only looking at what the world work looks like, but also having to look at, from an individual basis, what is going to be most productive, and that's quite difficult to navigate. So how have you done that? You've still got to be, you have shareholders, you've got all of these people that are on your back, you've got to perform, but yet everyone's doing things to different times in different ways. So, help those other employers that I thought, yeah, but that won't really work here. So how have you got it to work?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that's a really, really great point, that people do feel, yes, it can work other places, but it won't work here. And it's interesting. I recently had on my podcast a lady called Aisha, who was the founder of the Black Employee Resource Group within Amazon. And she was telling me that, when you start a business, not baking in diversity and inclusion from a very early stage, then when the business gets much later down the line, it's so difficult to right those wrongs. So I think it's a sort of thing which businesses need to focus on as early as possible to try and make sure that they are set up that way. But then, of course, they've got to do the work to redress that where they haven't done it, right? Obviously, the earlier you can solve the problem, the better, but you still need to solve the problem regardless of what stage you're at. And I think a lot of it is to do with mentality. A lot of it is to do with mentality, and ultimately you don't know if those things are going to work for you unless you try them. And I think that's ultimately going to be the biggest test, is we should be quantitative with the way that we look at these things. And if we have the chance to, create cohorts and groups where we give them flexible working, or we, whatever it might be. And it's, amazing. Some of the corporates that I've spoken at, one of the big debates was, should people be allowed to wear headphones when they work? So some corporates are still so far behind in terms of accommodating these things. It's quite scary at times. But I think you just need to look at the stats. I think you need to look at the stats, and I think you need to look at the reality that if you're wanting to hire the best in Gen Z talent, they're only going to accept an accommodating environment. And they have such a moral compass built into them, and they have such a desire for equality built into them, that if you want to hire from that generation and not end up spending so much on recruitment fees and just, constantly trying to, be on that hamster wheel of talent, new talent coming through, you're going to have to do it or you're going to get left behind. And I think that's my big message, which says, okay, maybe if you're of a certain generation, you don't see why it's so important, but your business is not going to be able to attract the right talent in 5 years' time, and then you're really going to suffer from it. So I think it's only going to become increasingly important.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting, so you're talking about stats, employers surveyed neurodiversity in business, and said that neurodiverse workforces are hyper-focused by 80%, think innovatively by 75%, and have more creativity by 78%. And JP Morgan found that autistic employees worked 48% faster and were almost 100% more productive than non-autistic colleagues.
Wow.
Which is really powerful, isn't it? And like from a society point of view, we tend to view divergent people, and I hate that word. I really hate neurodivergent. Neurodiversity I'm fine with, but neurodivergent, and I've seen this word quite a lot, and it just, the hairs in the back of my neck seem to, it's like divergent, it's something bad and negative. But actually, the more we talk about the positive stats and how this can really help businesses, and how it's a major advantage if you get someone's strength. So it doesn't matter about the neurodiversity, but it's their strength. What is their strength? Identifying what that is and putting them in the right position. That's everybody in the right position to excel. the individual benefits, the company benefits. So putting them in the right position is actually not only about the position, but it's about the environment as well for them to excel. Who wouldn't want that? I mean, these stats are 100% more productive than non-autistic colleagues.
It's so interesting. It's amazing stat, Janice. Thank you so much for pulling that one out. I'm definitely going to steal that one and use it again.
You'll get it. Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting, and you're right, because so my brother is not severely but moderately autistic, and you know, if you were in a typical interview environment which maybe didn't appreciate the social nuances of autism, you'd think maybe that's not a good cultural fit. So you know, you need to have I don't know the right word, but qualifiers possibly for interviewing diverse candidates in a different way, potentially. I'm not sure, but I think, yeah, that's definitely something which I've seen hamper his ability to get employment, for example.
Yeah, I'm a partner in a database that's been going. It's sales specific and it's verified data. 25 years, it's had 2.3 million people that have answered these questionnaires. And I've even interviewed on the podcast people that are recruiting for sales, and it's often, you know, CVs, which are only 18% verified predictive. And it's like we're constantly using these things that are barriers to people, and the words, you know, that they use are barriers to people. But if you have a survey or questionnaire, and it's anonymous, and it, you know, it doesn't go to an individual, it goes to a machine who identifies the strengths and benchmarks that against what good looks like in the industry for this sector, you know, based on the environments that they're going into, you can almost throw anybody at that.
Yeah.
You know, neurodiversity, you want to throw them at that, because the thing is, the database will identify the individual strengths, because we as individuals don't always know what our strengths are. But if you benchmark that against what good looks like, and there's a whole history that's verified, and I think we need to move recruitment more into that and away from the personality and the biases that we automatically have. And it means then, if you use this as your first filter, then you've already got someone that is recommended. And then the individual cannot fight against that. The biases cannot fight against that. You know, the data kind of stacks up. And I think we need to use this more in order to allow a wider pool of people into the workforce. Because if we're relying on personality and our biases, then we're not going to go anywhere, are we?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I think we're at a really, really pivotal moment in recruit tech, for example, where I'm seeing a lot of people leveraging AI, and there's got to be big questions around how those models are trained and what data sets are they using, because there's such a worry that if we're training it on these traditional models of what good looks like and what success looks like, and these become the norm, then yes, absolutely, we're going to be recruiting from the same pool of people again and again and again, and that ability to broaden it out becomes even more threatened. So I think I really hope there are people who are listening to this who are working on this space who can say, yeah, you know, we are focusing on making sure that machine learning models are being trained on a really broad and diverse data set.
Yeah. Okay. So in relation to that, I want to talk about social economics in business, because I know that this is another kind of like area that we went into a conversation a bit around this, but I'd like to kind of like gain more of your knowledge and experience in this area. So what is your beef about this? Hey, Ron?
It's an interesting one. I think obviously going to, you know, state school, going to, you know, going through a situation where most of the people I've seen along the way on this journey have had a very different background in that sense, and maybe, you know, a different level of, financial privilege growing up, for sure. And it's not necessarily a beef, but I think it's just important that we understand. And I think things are improving from what I'm seeing in terms of more people wanting to get involved with entrepreneurialism, but there's still the same issues of funding where I don't know if there are stats around this, but probably the likelihood of you getting funding if you went to the right public school, went to the right university that flows from public school, your Oxbridge, wherever it might be, your likely outcomes of success are massively different. And I think it's a shame, because it's, entrepreneurialism, and either in terms of founding a company or investing in a company or advising a company, can be one of the biggest wealth creators there is. And having people precluded from that conversation just never sat well, right? It's never sat well. And I think that's why there's so much to be done around education, so much to be done around accessibility. And there are so many structural inequalities when it comes to even investing in startups. You can go and put your whole paycheck in a fixed odds betting machine every single week. No one's going to stop you, but you need to be a sophisticated high net worth to invest in a startup, and these sorts of things, which are designed to keep, people out of certain opportunities, never sit well. So the more that we can do to increase education, the more that we can do to really try and lower the barriers there, then the better off everyone's going to be. And ultimately, the rising tide lifts all boats, and that's what we've got to strive for.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, Roy. I mean, it's really shocking that women get 1%.
Yeah,
1% of the pie investment.
Yeah.
So, as you say, if investors look a certain way, have a certain view of the world, have come from, a privileged background, they're going to invest in things that they understand, which is going to be quite narrow. And, if there's so few investors that are women, then less women are going to get investment funding, and the same on diversity and across the board. So, being able to create a level playing field would mean that we've got more innovation and creativity at our fingertips, because it's more accessible. So it's good for all, isn't it? So how are you addressing this?
So one of the things that we're really passionate about with Connected is we wanted to make it as low barrier to entry as possible. So for a business to join Connected, it starts at, I think the lowest entry point is like £25 a month. We wanted to make it at a level where everyone can access this. Assuming you have £25 a month, but we wanted to make sure that people were not excluded from that conversation. And then, of course, the way that people are connected on the platform is really based around non-demographic metrics and non-demographic criteria. What stage are you at? What customer group are you targeting? What sector are you in? What's your business model? So you're discovering businesses, discovering opportunities based on skills, based on interest, rather than based on education or based on, who they are. So matching people more along those lines, or actually this is more of a commercial thing rather than one tinged by bias in that way, that's really something that we're passionate about. So it's how we started day one, people matching along those lines. You're not matching with a founder, you're matching with a business. I don't know what that founder looks like. I don't know their name. I'm matching with their business. So it's something which we've baked in from day one, and something we'll always do.
Fantastic. I just want to pick up on another area that I remember you mentioned, how you're, founder, master and servant at the same time. So you have two masters. So you're having to sell up to investors, but also sell down, not so much down, but amongst the team. So what is your belief and mindset about sales and selling?
So I think so you're 100% right in terms of, as a investment-backed CEO, you've got two organizations. You have your internal organization, which is your team, and your external organization, which is your shareholders. And, for a company like Connected, you're talking about 80 people in the internal organization, 60 people in the external one, and then your sandwich, your the filling in the middle of the organizational sandwich, as it were. So yeah, there's a lot to do. I think one of the things that is key is transparency. So the end of month reporting that I share, that I power through the Connected platform, of course, goes to everyone in the organization. So the narrative that goes to the entire organization, external and internal, is consistent, and it stays the same throughout, which obviously makes it really easy in terms of everyone being aligned of where we are, where we're trying to get to, what's going well, what are the challenges. So I think that's a really important part. But then ultimately, for me, the sell is more around a long-term outcome, right? You know, it's very much a sell on, we need to have, we'll all be inspired, all support each other, that we're going to get to something really exciting down the line. So it's a very, very long sales cycle, right? It's like a 6-7 year sales cycle, you know, being a CEO in that sense. But I think you've got to, the most important thing is to practice what you preach. So you've got to be there with the work ethic. You've got to be with the mindset, the positivity, because it's ultimately a really, really long process to get from, you know, founding to exit. But yeah, transparency and really embodying what you're trying to sell is so important.
So what have you learned along the way that you could share with our listeners, you know, from pitching to investors to sharing the vision amongst the team? That's the mechanism to how to do it. But what have your kind of personal learnings that you think many founders are perhaps not aware of that you could share?
Yeah, 100%. My absolute biggest tip on this side is, if you're a founder that can't make sales, you can't expect anyone else to. You can't say, I've got this amazing product, but no one wants to buy it. I need a salesperson to come in. You've got to be the one to build the book. Someone else can pick it up and scale the team. And you might not be a great sales manager, but if you don't have the ability to sell your product, no one else will. So if you're a founder, you need to go and speak to customers. You need to go and sell the product and make sure that it's something that they want, and don't sit in your bubble saying, this is great, everyone's going to love it. Once we get a sales team in, it's going to fly. If you're not able to sell it, it's not going to sell. So that's my top tip for founders, is sell it yourself before you expect anyone else to.
Do you know what, Roy? I wish I could have paid you for that, because the amount of times I've said this, I'm part of an accelerator program, and it's like, well, how do we get a salesperson in? You don't.
Yeah, exactly that.
It's like,
exactly
yeah, but
that.
I need someone that can sell. Yeah, that's you.
Yeah, spot on.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to take this bit out and have it on replay and just send it to all these people. You know, so yeah, great tip. Okay, so if you're on a desert island on your own, what's the one thing you take with you?
My laptop. Easy as that. Because I've managed to build a life with basically no material things around me. I always say, like, if my flat burnt down, if I had my laptop, that's all that matters. So I've managed to be as minimalist as possible. All I need is my laptop.
You travel light, and you're getting a solar paneled one, so you know you'll be happy on your desert island. You'll still be connected. Thank you for being a guest on Scale Your Sales podcast.
Thanks so much, Janice. We'll speak soon. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Scale Your Sales podcast. If you like this discussion, feel free to listen to other episodes or watch the captioned show on YouTube and subscribe to future episodes. I would really appreciate it if you would leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you.